Hiya. So this is the reading podcast, my first reading podcast on its own. I made a wee video last week about my knitting, and thank you very much if you've watched that, and welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you've not found me before. Yeah, I'm just going to be talking about books that I've read in the last couple of months, books that I'm planning to read, and books that I'm currently reading, just sort of standard format. I'm a voracious reader. I've been reading, since I learned to read, and really love, quite a conservative taste, though I don't go much for science fiction or fantasy or anything like that. I like basically classics, stuff from the last century and the century before that, and further back. Nothing much from this 21st century at all. Just finding my way through the classics, I guess. And yeah, so that's, I would think if you watch booktubes at all, it's a kind of combination of Miranda Mills and Benjamin McAvoy, which is quite a nice place to land, I think. So I'm going to talk about books that I've been reading March and April, but I'm going to go back into February a wee bit, because the one that I was reading mostly in February was this marvel, absolutely amazing book. It's Moby Dick, or The Whale, by Herman Melville. Now, you may have read this, you may have been made to read it at school or picked it up, but I had never read it before. I had sort of vague memories of watching it on a Sunday afternoon, I think, on the TV, black and white, film version with Gregory Peck as Captain Ahab, and it just been thrashing about harpoons and whales and shouting men, and and the cruelty of it as well. I didn't want anything to happen to the whale. But I don't know what made me pick this up. It had been on my list for a while, and I just went for it, basically. And it's ostensibly a story about a whaling voyage, and the interactions of the crew, and there's the brooding, half-mad Captain Ahab, who commands the Pequod, which is the name of the boat that they go out, and his obsessive quest to kill the white whale, Moby Dick, who bit his leg off on a previous voyage. But it's not just about that. I mean, the actual story probably takes up half the book. The content of that narrative. But it's so much more. It's it's adventure, it's poetry, it's song, it's philosophy. It contains Shakespearean soliloquies. There's sudden changes of pace and genre, just halfway through almost. 1 minute you're absolutely lost in this amazing meditation on the whiteness of the whale, and whiteness and all that encompasses, and then you're slap bang in the middle of a chain gang of deckhands passing buckets of water along. It's just incredible, and you learn so much you know, more than you ever imagined there was to know about whales and whaling and whaling ships. You know, you get detailed anatomy of the whale, quite gruesome descriptions, it has to be said. You know, it is a story about killing whales, so there's no getting away from that. So there's the hunt and the butchering of the whale goes into a lot of detail, but there's, like, I'd say, an almost sacred reverence for the creature, you know, the creature of the whale. It's quite very meditative. You know, we find out how important whales were to the economy at the time it was written in the, I don't know, 18. It was just that it came to the end of slavery in America, which, you know, there's a lot of the themes around that. I mean, the whiteness chapter could be read as that, I guess. But I find, you know, the whaling industry was massively important. Whale oil was the way people, you know, lit their homes, and, you know, the oil lamps and life and economy, and you know, you could so easily compare that to our own modern day reliance on fossil fuels. You know, and the hunt for the whale, the hunt for oil. You know, there's, I guess we can certainly think of quite a few modern day Captain Ahabs who will stop at nothing in their search for fortunes made from oil. But yeah, it was a fantastic book. It stayed with me for such a long time. You know, it's tragic, it's comedic, it's crazy, electrifying. It's, you know, an attempt to come to terms with the mystery of existence, I guess. Certainly it's a voyage I would encourage anybody to take, or retake if you've already read it. Just incredible writing, and yeah, quite a voyage. So that is the book that I read. I don't know, I think I read most of it in February, and yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. It's, classics are classics for a reason, and you know, yeah, you might feel a wee bit squeamish about some of the stuff, but and I hate the phrase "it's a book of its time," because actually it's a book for now. It is a book for now. There's still so relevant, and definitely would. I'll be reading this, you know, a couple of times, I think, and certainly dipping into it. Still staying with me. So yeah, definitely a good one. So after thrashing about in the ocean for several weeks, I picked up The Wind in the Willows, really because it's a nice, easy read, and it was on my bookshelf. And also, I had mentioned Miranda Mills, who does a lovely podcast, and she runs what she calls the Comfort Book Club once a month. That, you know, everybody reads a book and then she has a podcast and it's discussed. And the book for March was The Wind in the Willows. So I picked this up and had a wee read through it. Now, I've read this loads of times. It's a lovely book. I've read it to children, you know, my children, grandchildren. I've read it just myself at different ages. And I hadn't read it for a few years though. And somehow, it really, I didn't gel with it this time. It annoyed me, and what's this? And I think, because it's been a few years since I've read it, and a lot has happened in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, politically, I guess. And I just found Toad reminded me too much of somebody that was, you know, quite important politically in our lives in the UK. Possibly the US as well, I don't know, but you know, that it was very jolly boys together, and just annoyed me, and I thought, what? Oh, you know, this is just upper class guys on the river, you know, mucking about. I was disappointed, and then I watched the book club podcast, and in it Miranda and her mum Donna were, you know, just got talking about the author Kenneth Grahame and how they had read a bit about his, you know, looked into his life a bit and how sad and tragic it was. And you know, I kind of changed my mind. I kind of thought, well, it's not that. That's just my projection of the last few years put onto this book, which was written. You know, I mean, he worked in a bank. I mean, he did rise to become quite high up in the bank, but he had a sad and tragic life and lost his son quite young, and his childhood was difficult. And you know, I guess it's just it is a cosy book, a way friends reconciling with each other's differences and helping each other, and you know, just caring for each other. And I kind of began to see that again. So I think I'm back. I'm okay. I'm okay with The Wind in the Willows again. But yeah, it's a nice wee book, and there's beautiful things in it, you know. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in Badger's house? You know, fantastic. So yeah, that was a nice one. And then went on to read this one. Beautiful cover. I bought it actually for the cover. I saw it years ago in our co-op, have a sort of book stall at the entrance where you can leave your second-hand books and buy new ones, and it goes to charity. Now this is, I put it upside down, sorry I have. So it's In the Springtime of the Year by Susan Hill. Susan Hill's quite a well-known, the Woman in White she wrote. And I saw this and I just loved the cover, the William Morris. Yeah, William Morris design. And so I brought it home and sort of looked at the description, which is a young woman, Ruth, widowed at 21. Suddenly her husband Ben is killed in a work accident, and she's left to negotiate this basically on her own at such a young age. Now, you know, I was widowed a few years ago, about 8 years ago. It is 8 years ago. It's not about 8 years ago, it's 8 years coming up. And it was never really something I wanted to read about. You know, you're just getting through the days. I remember thinking, you know, oh, I have to get this, what's that famous book, The Year of Magical Thinking, and I read it, I think maybe, you know, 2 days after John had died, thinking it would be some magic thing that would get me through, and it just went in one, you know, just went right through, and I had can't even think about what that book was about. So, you know, you just have to go through it. But this, I picked this up because it was spring, and because I was looking for books about spring, and this was sitting. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. And what a beautiful, a lovely wee book it was. You know, she's a good writer, Susan Hill, you know, there's no getting away from it. But this was, I think, obviously based on experience, because you feel that somebody could only write this if they've experienced a loss like that. And it was a very gentle, meditative journey through grief. You know, really, the writing is so understated and yet really powerful. It's just, and for me it encompassed the ebb and flow in those early days after the bereavement, when you're, you know, getting through it. There's sort of the waves of grief that suddenly overwhelm you out of nowhere, and then they subside, and you're sometimes left with quite a lot, you know, calm and quite a lot of clarity, and then they come again, but they come less and less, and it's just so very beautifully done. And you know, just the story of this young woman dealing with her husband's loss. And her husband was a young man in the village. It's a country village. I'm not quite sure when it was set, but he was quite an important character in the village and people's lives. You know, young, vital man suddenly is cut down like that, and how it affects not just her, but his family, everybody in the community. You know, his workmates, his class, people that he was at school. Just the whole community is affected by the death of this young man, and it kind of explores, mainly through her eyes, her coming to terms with not just her own grief, but how other people have coped with it. And eventually, you know, she is able to help other people through her experience. But I would say this was, yeah, just very, very low-key. Nothing spectacular in it, but just pitch perfect. I just thought, no, this is the book, but maybe not right away. You know, you need some breathing space, and yeah, I definitely loved that. That was a special wee treat that I didn't expect. And then, so I'm kind of on a theme, spring. You know, I do like a seasonal read. I do like to read books that are set in the season, which is why I had picked that one up. And my next one is Agatha Christie, although I don't think it says writing is Mary Westmacott, so this binding, I think the original books would not let you know that it was Agatha Christie. Absent in the Spring. Now, this was, although I'm saying it's not Agatha Christie, it's, you know, it's not a crime novel, or is it? You know, it's a book, middle class, middle-aged Joan, who's got a very defined self-image about herself and her life and her position, you know, wife of a solicitor, and her place in society for her four children, 3 children, don't remember now. 3 children she has. And she's visiting, she goes to visit one of her daughters who live in Iraq, you know, so that's Agatha Christie. That was a, you know, important place for her. So she goes to visit her younger daughter who's just had a baby, and her husband who are living in Iraq, and there's been some sort of illness, and she decides that she's the only one that can go and that can help, so she bustles away out to Iraq. And on the way home, so she's travelling home, she becomes delayed. You know, the travel arrangements fall down. There's a big rainstorm, and the trains that she's going to can't. She misses a train, and because of the rains, excuse me, she has to wait a few days for the next train. And she's stuck at this place in the middle of the desert, just a kind of traveller's rest. And the train keeps getting delayed because the railway has been washed away at some point, and they have to fix it. So she's there for almost a week in this hotel in the desert. Not even a hotel, it's just a yeah, like a roadhouse type thing. It's a rail stop. And she quickly runs out of her reading material, and there's nothing else to read in the hotel. So she just goes walking about and sitting in the desert and just enjoying the time. But then she begins to think. She begins to think about her life and reflect. And so you get her thought process, this story of her, you know, growing up in school and marriage and children and things that have happened since then. And the clues, you know, just as surely as Poirot or Miss Marple will figure out the clues start appearing. And yeah, what does she find at the end? What can what will she find out about herself? It's a dangerous thing, a period of time to do nothing but self-reflect. And yeah, it was good. It was very good. In fact, I think in the back here it said, Agatha Christie writing, the one book that has satisfied me completely, the book I always wanted to write. So looking back over the years, Joan painfully re-examines her attitudes, relationships and actions, and becomes increasingly uneasy about the person who is revealed to her. So who is the person that returns? I would read it, I think. You know, read it, it's good if you've not. So another book that I read, I had a blast through some quite short books, quite seasonal books, just as a palate cleanser after my big read. So this one is Penelope Fitzgerald, The Beginning of Spring, it's called. I've read one of her books before, I think The Golden Child, but picked up this one and really enjoyed it. It was very funny, really sharp observation of life, set in Moscow in 1913, but it's the main character is called Frank Reed, who was born and brought up in Moscow. His father had emigrated, his family had emigrated in the 1870s from the UK, from England, to set up a print works. And, you know, he had now taken over the business. And there's just a set of disparate characters in this book. He had gone back over at some point to England to do some, I don't know, apprenticeship type work, and had met his wife at that point, what was she called, Nellie, and they'd married and come back over, and they had this household with various servants and the 3 children, the people that worked at the print shop as well, you know, the actual printers themselves, the accountant who was English, I forget his name, but he was quite a character. He was a Tolstoyan, so he believed in, you know, going to the woods and back to nature and stuff like that. And so everything's fine, and then one day Frank's wife Nellie takes the children off on the train and just goes randomly out of the blue, and they go off. And then later on in the day, Frank gets a message to go and pick his children up from the train station. So what had happened was she packed them all on a train, and then had decided at some point in the journey that she wasn't taking the children, so she got off, put them on another train back to Moscow, and she continued her journey. So he got a message to pick the children up from the train station, and it's how he deals with that, and you know, while trying to work out where the wife's gone. And in between this time, Nellie's brother comes over, and he's, you know, they're all mad characters, they're all really eccentric, but it is such a funny book. And it's just the story of this wee interlude in the life, and how he deals with it, how the kids deal with it, how how life goes on, and life doesn't go on. And again, it's another one of these books where nothing actually happens. Well, a lot happens, but nothing really happens. And it's just very quiet and understated, but it really is funny. I'm not selling it very well. I get the feeling that people that watch it will go, what? But, there's no questions that are answered. It's like a wee snapshot of a moment. And 1930 in Moscow, Europe's about to explode. The world's about to explode. And we get this wee snapshot, and it's delightful. The description to, not just Moscow, but they go to their wee summer house as well, and the description of that. It just is fascinating, and something that you would never really find normally in a book. So I don't know when this was written. 1988, but is that the print? Yeah, 1988, it's quite modern for me. But yeah, a nice wee book, which was a wee bit different and funny, and I laughed a lot. And it's got a nice ending. So, another recommendation. What am I doing? How am I getting on? Am I getting through this pile? Excuse me. We then went on to some sort of February, March was Lent, and I mean, I'm from a Presbyterian background, so we don't actually do Lent, but I do like the idea of it. And so I would come across this book, Delia Smith, A Feastful Lane, and it's not a cookery book. It's just a wee series of meditations and readings and prayers that you read over Lent, starting on Ash Wednesday. And it goes through, so you get a reading and a meditation and a prayer for every day. And really, really lovely book. She writes so nicely. You just feel she's, we've watched her, certainly in the UK, we've watched Delia Smith teach us how to cook. Very reassuring. Christmas is, Delia is the one that, certainly the one that I go back to all the time. So this was a lovely wee experience. Just we reading every day. A Feastful Lane, and just she writes about her own journey as well, and I enjoyed that. It's very, I like the idea of it. I like the idea of this sort of period of reflection and sort of journeying through your own desert and seeing what you find there. So that was a nice book that I read, and I'll certainly do that again. She's got an Advent one, so I'll probably do that as well. And in the same vein, I had this Woman of Holy Week, Paula Gooder, and that's 9 stories, and there's some nice lovely illustrations. Miriam's story. So she was heading off to, and just wee stories. She got caught up in the Palm Sunday walk or Hosanna. You know, someone pushed a branch into my hand as we got close to the end of the psalm. I found myself singing and waving my branch. That was nice. And then, you know, different stories, and they're all connected. You know, so Sarah was she was the wife of one of the Pharisees that asked questions of Jesus, and you know, just different things. Anna, you know, different people's stories. Salome, who was at the foot of the cross. Yeah, and there's still one. I've still one story to go, and it's Mary, the mother of Jesus' story, because that's going to be an Ascension Day. And there's just a couple of wee pages, and then at the back, if you've got a book group or something like that, or a Bible study group, there's things to think about, things to read about. I did this. I did both these readings with my friend, and yeah, it gave us a wee focusy discussion, so that was nice. This one, so we're still in the sort of biblical theme. Angel and Me short stories by Sarah Maitland. I've read some of her stuff before and quite liked it, and I did like most of this book. This book is split into 4 types. There's a really lovely set of stories about Sarah, the wife of Abraham, which you never hear her story at all, so it's quite nice to get that about, you know, being in the desert, you know, the birth of the son, sending Hagar off into the desert, and one called Cookbook, which is things that they eat in the desert. The desert. And then it goes on to the Women of Holy Week again, Martha, different women of the Passion, Mary of Magdala, and then there's sort of the first, I don't want to say man, there's a story about Lady Godiva, and various martyrs, Mary Fisher, Margaret Clitheroe, who was burnt or pressed to death because she hid priests, and Perpetua and Felicity, who were they were Roman Christians who were put to death by the Roman in the arena, and that sort of story. The last set of stories were about her and her own guardian angel, which I didn't like as much, but you know, it was a bit, I just didn't like the style, the sort of chatty, her and I didn't, but the other ones I really loved, really enjoyed them, so that was a nice book. And as I say, I did read all the stories, and they were interesting and thought-provoking. I just didn't get on with the style of the last set. So that's still going. This is a non-fiction book that I read, The Gardens of the British Working Classes. It's a non-fiction. It had been on my Amazon wish list for years, and one of my daughters got it for Mother's Day for me, so that was really nice. And what a fascinating and really interesting book. It's a social history of British gardens and gardening and gardeners, and how people, you know, most of the working class gardened. And it was absolutely fascinating. I thought, you know, I mean, I grew up with my grandfather. In fact, when I was reading it, I was thinking there was 3 gardens in my childhood came to mind. You know, my grandfather, my papa, had a big garden and grew vegetables for us all. My Uncle Matt, who was a miner, my papa was a miner and he was a miner in the north of England, and he had a big garden, did the same, and I remember just feeling so at home when we used to go and visit them in his big garden. Just exactly the same, you know, it just seemed so normal. And then there was my great Uncle George, who I don't really remember him much at all, but he had a market garden in Edinburgh, and quite a posh part of Edinburgh now, but I don't know how posh it was at the time. And I just remember, you know, we would go and visit them probably once a year. They would come out and visit us sort of at Christmas time, and then we would go out in the summertime, because travel just wasn't, you know, you didn't bomb about in your cars as much in those days. So, you know, it was always someone. I always remember running up and down this sort of terraced garden. So gardens are a big part of my memory growing up, and are a big part of what I do now, and always have been. So that, just so interesting, you know, how people gardened and the social history of it. And it begins way back in the days of the plague and goes all the way up to relatively recently. A nation of gardeners. And there's some incredible, beautiful illustrations and photographs. Obviously there's a chapter on Dig for Victory, but no, I mean, it doesn't go overboard with that. It looks at flowers and flower growing, and, you know, a working man tending his window box for a flower show. Trying to show you. I mean, that. So that's a picture of this one here. It's Hackney. That's what Hackney looked like in the beginning of the 1800s, you know. And just really beautiful drawings. I mean, I love that. The women and their cabbages, and that really resonated with that one. So it's not, you know, it's not a book about big, you know, the Sissinghursts and the, all that kind of thing. Although, you know, there is a chapter about gardeners that went to these places, and working gardeners, flowers, passion for flowers, revolutions in taste, competitions, like that. You know, that even in the slums, or what we would call the slums in the working class areas, you know, people were really, you know, dedicated to. They would grow flowers in their windows, and, you know, the flower show was a big deal. So really fascinating book. Really loved it, and you know, I read it quite quickly, but it's a great reference. So if you're a gardener at all, I would recommend that. Although I'm not sure if it must still be available. If it's Yale University Press, and it must still be available if it arrived just this year, after having been on my wish list for a while. So yeah, I like that one. So that's all my pile that I've read. What am I reading at the minute. And this Ronald Blies, making Next to Nature, sorry. I had, it's split into months. I've just finished reading April. It arrived, I forgot, I had pre-ordered it, because it came out I think last year in the hardback, and then I saw that there was a paperback due out, which was a bit more affordable. So I went for that, and it arrived, and I was pleasantly surprised, I have to say. I love his writing. I read Word from Wormingford last year, over the year. So it was another book that's sort of split, sort of diary-like, so you can follow it along as you go. So I've read April. Some of the stuff I had already read is sort of a compilation of his works, but I'll be ready to start May very soon. So that's a nice week. Just a wee dip in, a wee paragraph a day. A nice thing to do. Another thing that I'm reading every day is I'm doing a chronological read of the Bible, which is reading it a totally different way of reading it, although, you know, it's not that different, because you're basically following it, but what happens is that you get an occasional psalm, you know, so the psalms come in at the right time, at the time they were written. Chronicles and Kings kind of run close together. Job comes before Exodus in this book, so we get Genesis and then Job and then Exodus, because I think you could kind of go Exodus and then Job. I think that Moses and Job kind of lived at the same time, so that's quite good, and it's a great story. I mean, Old Testament's an amazing story. Today's reading was David and Bathsheba, and you just want to shout, no, don't, no. But he does, because we're all flawed. We're all flawed. But that was quite a hard story to read. Beautiful woman, powerful man. What's changed? So I'm enjoying doing this. I'm getting quite a lot from it. I'm doing it along with a commentary, enduring word commentary. It's just, I just found it online, but it's really good, and you know, contains a lot of extra bits and pieces that you wouldn't find. You know, I've done Bibles with commentaries before. It's not like, not something fabulously new for me, but it just seems to be really speaking to me this year. So enjoying that very much, and keeping up with it. And what else? Yeah, I'm waiting on a book to arrive. I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is my current other read. Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern. This is an absolutely bonkers book. It's it says it is a huge literary paradox, because it is a novel and an anti-novel, and it's just a joy. You can't read it too much. You know, you can't read the whole book. Well, I don't think I could read the whole book. I've been popping in and out of this since the beginning of the year, because it goes off. I mean, what am I at? Page 206. And the book starts, like Tristram Shandy writing about his life, but it starts on, before he was even conceived. His life history starts like the night that he was conceived, which is hilarious in itself. And then we're at page 206, and he has actually just been born the day that I'm reading. since I'm just now been born. So it's quite a life story, and it just goes into tangents, absolutely off the wall tangents, random, stories about, goodness me, all sorts of things. And then you get other stories inserted, like the tale of, I don't know if I can even, I don't think I worked out how to pronounce it, Slockenbergius. The tale of Slockenbergius is inserted into this. And then you get, he'll come on, and he'll come on in between chapters of the life and talk to you like, addressing, you madam, or sirs, or your worships. Breaks the fourth wall all the time. And so you get the story, and you also get the process of him writing the story, like I think it was last night I was reading, and it talks about how, I've just flung the fair copy of this page in the fire instead of the, the other copy. It really is an enjoyable book, but it's quite a lot, to take in. Your mind is reeling with it all. It's so fast paced. So yes, it's really enjoyable. It was published, I think, in volumes over 4 years. So, I'm quite happy to dip in. That's the way it should be read, in instalments. So that's okay. I just noticed in the introduction a quote from Lawrence Stern, who was the writer. I begin with writing the first sentence and trusting to Almighty God for the second. So that is this book in essence. But it's really funny. I mean, I sit there, I'm reading it in bed at night before I go to sleep, and I've got this stupid grin on my face at some points, and then the joke dawns on you at other points, and you go, oh my goodness. So yeah, this is a really enjoyable book, and I'm, hopefully I'll finish it this year. I'm not going to wait 4 years to read it, but that's what I'm reading at the moment. And I have a couple of things that I'm going to read. This is this is what I'm on to read next. I've read it before, it's a reread. Proust, In Search of Lost Time. But this is a lesson in be careful what edition you buy of a book, because I had a nice copy of this, and I don't know what's happened to it. It's obviously been lost in a move somewhere. I had a look for it, and then I thought, I'll just get, the cheap copies are usually fine. Well, this arrived, and I've no idea who. It just said printed in Great Britain by Amazon, so it's not published or anything. And I mean, look at that. That's unreadable to me. There's no way. I know it's stream of consciousness stuff, but what's the enjoyment in it? It's like single spaced. Well, maybe not single spaced, but tiny text. That would just, it's not laid out nicely, and I think that makes a difference to a book, how it's laid out. So, and this was just a cheap copy, and I thought it was the usual kind of classic type things, which are always okay, they're always fine, but I just felt, no, I can't read that, so I've ordered a second-hand vintage edition. So once that arrived, I actually hoped it would be here today, but there's been no sign of it. So that is on my pile, and I think I'm probably going to read this at some point, which has been kicking about in the bookshelf for a wee while. Margaret Drabble, Jerusalem the Golden. I'd be interested to see this. It's a book written in the 60s, I think, about class. You know, northern girl raised in a strict religious family, goes down south and becomes liberated type thing. I'll say I don't know if it'll have dated well, but I did quite like the cover. Again, I can't even remember who. I think I maybe picked this up at the co-op book stand. So when I get fed up with Tristram, I'll pick up that unless Marshall arrives, in which case I'll get going with him. So that's my reading. I hope it held your interest. I really enjoyed all the books that I've read, and yeah, I hope if you've read any of them, let me know, or if you want any information on any more, anything, give me a shout. But that's it. So until next time, which possibly will be a gardening-ish type one. Things are starting to heat up now, so a couple of weeks time, it's exam time just now for the schools here, so I'll be kind of concentrating on that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for staying the course if you're still here, and I will see you next time. Bye.